and welcome to Theology Thursdays with me, Pastor Trudy of St. John's in Randolph.
And with me, my name's Cara, or Pastor Cara, at Christ Lutheran in Pierce. We're so glad that you could join us and talk about our upcoming lectionary text. But before we get started reading, because we've typically read before and just started there, we have some comments that we would like to share.
Well, yeah, because John, the gospel writer John, likes to make really big texts, and the context of our text really matters in order to help us understand and have a discussion around it. And so actually this text goes back to chapter 9, verse 1 is the beginning of it. And it ends with verse 21 of 10. So we are like coming in like at the end of Jesus's final speech here. And so the context of this, we read the first part of it weeks and weeks ago. Our very first virtual worship together was March 22nd. And the text for that day was chapter 9, beginning with verse 1. And it ended right before our text began today. And so that is the story of Jesus healing the blind man. And if we remember correctly, the man, he was born blind. And that's when Jesus spit into the mud and rubbed it on his eyes. And then he was healed. But then he went to the temple to be cleansed so that he could go and worship. And he was put on trial. And they called in his parents, and they didn't want to say anything because they were worried about getting into trouble and not being able to come to worship and all that fun stuff. So then he got called back up, and then Jesus interrupted the whole ceremony and called the Pharisees blind because they didn't recognize that only someone who is from God can heal a man born blind. And then we get today's text, which is the conclusion of that whole story. And so, and it takes this blindness a step further in that it starts to lead to blindness, like political blindness. So we'll hear in here how Jesus starts to talk about a thief and about, or a bandit. And the bandits would be the anti-Roman revolutionary leaders who were calling themselves the Messiah and leading people astray. And that's a very dangerous, life-threatening thing. If you start to follow a political revolutionary movement, you're risking your own life to do so. And so Jesus goes into this whole portion is titled in my Bible, Jesus the Good Shepherd, as a reminder that, well, maybe we'll get into that later. I'm jumping ahead. I'm sorry. I took notes, but I just started going.
You were on a roll. I wasn't going to interrupt you. Like, I could, but I wasn't going to. I like the story of the blind man, partly because it's real. Like the mud piece and the muck piece, as well as the way in which the Pharisees asked the questions, like, and his parents not wanting to put themselves out there because they're afraid of being, kicked out of the church, if you will, and that there is more than one type of blindness. You have spiritual blindness, you have physical blindness, you have revolutionary blindness, all of those things. And so even though our lectionary in this one aspect is not the best because it splits this apart, it does, we do need to take a look at how do we take blindness, or what blindness looks like, and bring that into the Good Shepherd story, which I'm sure we will do after we read. Yep. So I will start unless you have another comment. What's up?
I was just going to say something really quick. I was just going to say our text for today is 10 verses 1 through 10, but we are going to read through verse 21 to finish out this this man born blind episode.
Right.
Or scene.
And scene. Cut. The other thing is if we were in Bible study, I would even say, even though this is virtual, we would encourage all of you to take time to read both chapters, because it gives you the full picture versus not getting the full picture. Trudy said something earlier to me that makes a lot of sense. John is interconnected. The writer of John just continually connects who Christ is and how that works in the world, and those flow through every story that's given. And so it's hard not to just continually add verses, but in an effort to keep things to an hour instead of like 4, we cut verses and we put them in different spots. So let's begin with our reading. John chapter 10 verse 1. Very truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate but climbs in by another way is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So again, Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved, and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly.
I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the good shepherd, does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming, and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep who do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock and one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have the power to lay it down, and I have the power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father. Again, the Jews were divided because of these words. Many of them were saying, he has a demon, and he is out of his mind. Why are we listening to him? Others were saying, these are not the words of the one who is a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of one who is born blind?
I like the last sentence of that. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? It's one of the reasons we know that it ties back to the story of the blind man, because he's continually talking about what does it mean to be blind, and what are those different types of blindness that we face. Because it's not just about the physical healing. The physical healing is important, but it's not just about that. It's opening your eyes to new and different things that people are just not wanting to see. Yeah.
So as I would normally say in Bible study, Cara, what caught your attention or imagination?
I think there's a couple of things, like you were talking about right before we read, talking about thieves and bandits. What does it mean to be a thief and a bandit, and to lead people astray? And we ask those questions even today. How do we get led astray? Not just by the things we do in our daily lives, but by leadership or by political wants or greed or our sinful natures. I mean, we definitely are struggling with the same things of being led astray, maybe not in the same way, but it is easy. I don't even want to say it's easy. It just is a part of life that we do get led astray, and we have to be brought back. And as we have not gathered as a people all together, I think that it's even easier right now in some ways. Another thing that caught my eye is I like the line, and I have to find it because I have other sheep, right, that are not a part of the fold. That's always been a line that struck me, and I could sit here and analyze what sheep is he talking about? Who would we put in that? But I don't think it really matters. I think that it's a reminder that we can't always look at the grass being greener on the other side. You know, you have to talk about who you are in your own place and what that looks like. And what does it mean that Christ is the gate for you? And that he seeks after the one that is lost and opens your eyes, which are all really awesome pieces about being a believer and being a Christian. So Trudy, what strikes you or catches your imagination in this text?
I have two things. The first is when Jesus says, very truly, I am the gate for the sheep. You know how we talked about John being so interconnected. I think it was 2 weeks ago when we had the text about Thomas. Mm-hmm. And how he wasn't in the room when Jesus appeared among the disciples, even though their doors were locked. How did Jesus get in? Jesus is the door. It doesn't matter how Jesus got in, because Jesus is the way, right? Like Jesus just gets in. And so that's always a huge part of this, is that Jesus, because Jesus is the door, Jesus opens up our locked places, which we had talked about a couple weeks ago. But that's where that comes from, is because Jesus had already said that he is the door. That's how come he can enter into closed rooms and our own locked away places, because Jesus is the door. I know it
just magically appears.
I know I said two things, but I just remembered I have a third thing.
Yes. Third thing, go.
So I'm gonna go with the third thing, and then I'll go back to the second thing, because I want to end on the second thing. Verse 10, Jesus says, "I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." Abundant life is the whole purpose of Jesus coming to earth in the book of John. Everywhere, Jesus is saying, "I want you to have abundant life," in the book of John. And when Jesus says that, what that means is Jesus wants to be in relationship with us. And that's why he's the good shepherd and why we know his voice. And because if you're in a relationship with somebody, we know what their voice sounds like, and we can pick them out in a crowd, right? Mm-hmm. And that ties into the second thing that I wanted to talk about. Like I said, I went out of order. I went 1, 3, 2. But who said that this has to go in order?
Who said we couldn't just stop and be like, let's talk about abundant life today? Like, what does that even look like? As you have a relationship with Jesus, as you were talking, I kept thinking, abundant life doesn't mean what you want. Abundant life means freedom from all of those oppressive things that constantly pull you from actually putting God first. And that's a really weird thing to talk about because we struggle to put God first in the first place.
Right.
And have that relationship. So, what does abundant life? I feel like we could spend hours talking about abundant life and how we could do that better, trust that God is in the midst of that.
Well, an abundant life doesn't mean that we'll have an easy life or that there won't be bad things that happen. That's not what Jesus says. Abundant life means that you'll have a relationship with God and that God gets put first in your life. And like you had said, that doesn't mean that things won't happen, that there won't be hard things. And actually, this really does tie into my number 2 thing.
Awesome.
Like I said, 132.
132.
This is actually the text that I had chosen for my grandma's funeral. So the reason why I chose these texts goes back to that abundant life piece. Because if we have a relationship with Jesus and we have life abundantly in our, because of our relationship with God, we know what God's voice sounds like, and we follow that voice. And when my grandma was dying, she kept singing the hymn. Oh shoot! Now I don't remember the name of it, but the chorus talks about "Come home, come home, you who are weary, come home." And she kept saying that. She kept saying, "Jesus is calling me home." So I chose this text when we were looking at my grandma's funeral and planning out the funeral, because she knew what Jesus's voice sounded like, and she knew how to follow that home. Because she was singing that the hour that she died.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's important because it goes back to that abundant life piece. It goes back to the gate piece where Jesus, and it goes back to that whole relationship piece, like, and all the mysteries that entails, because there's a ton of mysteries in that.
I am, as you talk about Jesus's voice, it reminds me of the fact that when we listen to Jesus's voice, it releases us from the pressures of society. It releases us from the pressures of self-doubt and condemnation, both of ourselves and other people. And that factors into this just as much, because when life is kind of a cluster sometimes, and it just makes it really difficult to figure out what we're supposed to care about and how we're supposed to care about it. And yet God and Jesus remind us again that it's not that hard. It's simple. It's as simple as spitting in mud and putting it on the blind man's eyes. That God is able to open up our hearts so that we can see with spiritual sight, and know things that we didn't know before, and trust things that we didn't know before. And trusting in those things are a part of, like, your grandma, as I listened to that story, had so much trust in the fact that God was calling her home. There was no question. There was no, I'm going to second guess this or try and figure it out. She just knew that from that moment on, she was going to be with God. And that's so beautiful, and such a light for the rest of us, because I think a lot of times we want to, we get in this place that's just human, right? We're just human sometimes, and we're like, I need
sometimes
to just
all the time.
Well, we're like really human sometimes. Sometimes we're like, we remember we have the Holy Spirit, but a lot of times, and that we're baptized, but a lot of times we're like, right? But like this idea that when Christ is the gate, we've been found, and we have received sight, and we are able to see a thief for a thief, and a bandit for a bandit, and a sheep for a sheep. And even though we don't feel like we can do that a lot of the time, we trust that God's with us and that God is working through all of the things. And things are scary, I mean, we are recording this on Sunday and not on Thursday. So welcome to the love of video, but we've had a lot of government stuff happen on Friday with Governor Ricketts coming out and saying, here's some new legislature here, not legislature, but new rules about directed health measures and all of those things. And there's a lot of really strong feelings either way, and I'm not going to get into that. But what I do know is that that causes fear, right? Because of the unknown. We just don't know what will that look like, and how will that look like, and can we trust our leadership to help us make those decisions, and can we trust all of the things that we need to trust. And this is a reminder that, that we trust in God, and that we will make the best decisions we can, and we will probably make mistakes, but we're freed from being oppressed by those mistakes and can live into the next piece that says, okay, I can fix my mistake, and I can live into the next piece and care for people in new and different ways. And even while I'm separated by 6 feet of distance, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. So. Yeah. But I'm really excited. Can I announce this?
Yes.
Can I make an announcement about worship?
Yes. Announcement. Go.
So I know that it's been hard with virtual worship and not being able to gather as a community. But for the month of May, we're going to do drive-in worship. And we'll do that here at we'll do it at St. John's at the high school parking lot. Since we don't actually have a parking lot, the high school has graciously said, yes, you can use ours. At 5 p.m. on Saturdays during the month of May. And Cara, you're going to be there to help and to lead worship, and we're borrowing your equipment, so thank you.
Well, and I'm really excited. We've been working, it's been very awesome to be able to work with you as I'm talking to you, because I don't want to talk about you in like third person or what, second person, however that, I don't understand English language sometimes, so but, well, I don't. I'm really bad with grammar. I don't know which person I would be if I was like, really like working with Trudy as she sits in front of me. Anyway, so we were going to be in the high school parking lot in Randolph on Friday night, and then in
Saturday night.
Pierce, Saturday night.
Saturday night.
And Sunday morning we'll be here in Pierce. And while there are restrictions and regulations, I think that both Trudy and I are so excited to work together to bring to our communities something new and different, something to get out of your house and to get back into the habit of being somewhere on a Sunday morning and at least seeing people. Even if you can't talk with them, you can wave, which is amazing. I have been looking at the sign language website, because wouldn't it be cool if we could just all sign to each other? And just some amazing ways in which we're still working to connect. It's been such a joy to have our two communities connected, because we're not that far apart. And I feel like that's a way in which our eyes have been opened in and of itself during this time. We all face spiritual blindness in some form, because we want what we want and we don't want what we don't want. So yes, announcement. Drive-in worship.
I'm excited. I'm excited that we get to do this together. And I'm excited to gather with you guys, our people. Because I guess I'm going to speak for Cara and myself, but we miss you guys.
Amen.
Amen. And so, to use the language from our text, we get to gather together as one giant flock. I guess two giant. One on Saturday, one on Sunday.
Well, we're still all one big flock. That's the beauty of it as well, is it reminds us that we're all connected, and we're connected to all of the other churches who can't do this or can't be in this place or have to do things differently, and reminding each other that there really is, everybody is different, and we're going to all have to be okay with the fact that we're all going to do something different, which is awesome and amazing and stressful all at the same time. So yay, stress. Are there any other things we want to talk about with this text, or questions we have that people could think about as they read it themselves?
I just want to encourage everyone to read the whole scene. So starting with chapter 9, verse 1 and ending with chapter 10, verse 21. Read the whole scene. And some of this will start to make a little bit more sense because, like we said before, the lectionary breaks this up, I think, into like 4 different pieces. At least 3. I know for sure 3. I don't remember if there's a 4th in there somewhere. But and they're all at different times of the year, so it's not often that we get to read it all in one chunk. So I encourage that. I always encourage reading scripture, but this is particular because it's one whole scene and we came in like 3/4 of the way through.
Yep. My thing would be, as you read through it, ask yourself the same question Trudy and I ask each other each week. What strikes you and your imagination? And if you have questions or things, because there's a lot, these 2 chapters pack a lot. It's got healing, it's got Pharisees interrogating, it's got what does blindness mean? It's got sheep, it's got gates, it's got thieves and bandits. I mean, there's just a lot in it. And so as you question yourself, as you talk about what does it mean to live life abundantly, what does it mean for you that Jesus is the gate? What does it mean for you to have not to have spiritual blindness or to feel like you are in a blinded spot? What do those things look like for you? And please reach out. I know that Trudy and I would love your questions, and would love to talk with you about it anytime. So, yeah.
Yeah. I guess the only other thing I would add is maybe think or share with someone about a time when you've heard Jesus's voice guiding you, because we do recognize Jesus's voice. It says it here. So when do we know that it's Jesus talking to us?
Mm-hmm. And if you feel like if you feel like you haven't, how does that speak to you as well? You know, because that can be a challenge that we face. Because maybe we expect Christ's voice to sound like everybody else's voice, and maybe it doesn't. So what does that look like for you? We are so thankful for you joining us and watching our videos. We've had a few cool comments, like we seem like we're really natural on this, and some people think we're funny, which is awesome.
We are?
I think we're funny, but you know,
a little biased.
Not everybody. Totally biased. Totally biased. We look forward to seeing all of you through Drive-In Worship. And again, if you need anything, please reach out to us. I'm Pastor Cara. And
I'm Pastor Trudy.
And we're glad you joined us.
Thank you. Bye.